The storm came like a beast clawing at the sky. Rain hammered against the stone walls of Aurelian, turning the cobbled streets into rivers of mud and forgotten dreams. I stood at my window in the archives, watching lightning split the darkness over the western woods. The Blackwood. Everyone whispered about it, but no one dared speak its true name aloud. I was Lyra Darkin, 24 years old, and I had spent 6 years cataloging myths that scholars dismissed as children's tales. Silverpacks, Moon Kings, the Lunar Wars. All of it filed away in dusty corners where truth went to die. But tonight, something pulled at me. A thread of knowing that wrapped around my ribs and squeezed. The howls started at midnight. Low and mournful, they drifted through the rain like smoke through cracks. The city bells rang out the curfew, their iron voices commanding everyone to bolt their doors and shutter their windows. The Silver Order would be patrolling soon, hunting anything with wolf blood. I didn't listen. I pulled my cloak tight, slipped the ancient wolfskin map into my satchel, and stepped into the storm. The rain tasted like metal on my tongue. The path to the Blackwood was older than Aurelian itself. Roots twisted across it like sleeping serpents, and the trees grew so thick that even the storm's fury couldn't fully penetrate their canopy. My lantern flickered with each gust of wind, casting shadows that moved wrong, like they had minds of their own. The map led me deeper than I'd ever gone. Past the boundary stones marked with warnings in languages I'd studied but never heard spoken, past the hanging charms meant to ward off evil. The air grew colder with each step, and I could feel the weight of watching eyes. I should have been terrified. Every survival instinct I possessed screamed at me to turn back, but the pull was stronger now, a rope tied around my heart, dragging me forward. I thought of all the censored pages I'd found in the archives. The stories cut out with silver scissors, the names burned from records. Someone had worked very hard to make people forget this place. That meant there was something here worth remembering. The trees began to thin ahead, revealing a clearing bathed in pale, sickly light. The wind changed as I crossed into the clearing. It didn't just blow, it shaped itself. Whispers curled around my ears, speaking words I couldn't quite catch. They sounded like my name, stretched and twisted until it became something ancient and foreign. Lyra, Lyra, Lyra. But no one knew I was here. No one even knew I'd left the city. The clearing was circular, ringed by trees that had been burned black long ago. Their branches reached toward the center like grasping fingers. The ground was scorched earth, nothing growing except for patches of strange silver moss that glowed faintly in the darkness. I took another step, and the whispers grew louder. They weren't coming from the wind anymore. They were rising from the earth itself, from the roots beneath my feet, from the very bones of the forest. The voices overlapped, creating a chorus that made my skull ache. One word finally broke through clearly. Moonborn. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the clearing in blinding white light. That's when I saw it. In the center of the scorched earth, something massive stirred. The beast was larger than any wolf I'd seen in paintings or tapestries. Its body was easily the size of a small horse, covered in fur so black it seemed to swallow the light around it. But it wasn't the size that froze me in place. It was the chains. Thick silver links wrapped around its body, coiled tight around massive limbs and a powerful chest. Where the metal touched fur, the skin beneath was burned and blistered, weeping a liquid that shimmered like mercury in the lightning's flash. The chains were staked deep into the ground with iron posts driven through silver rings. The wolf's head lifted slowly, and I heard a sound that would haunt me forever. A whimper of such pure, hopeless agony that it bypassed my ears and stabbed directly into my heart. Its eyes opened, molten gold, burning with intelligence far beyond any animal. They fixed on me, and in that moment I understood. This was no ordinary wolf. This was something the world had tried to erase. Blood matted its fur, dark and thick. The silver chains glowed faintly, pulsing with some cruel magic that kept it bound. Every rational thought I possessed told me to run. This creature could tear me apart the moment it was free. The Silver Order had chained it here for a reason. But as I stared into those golden eyes, I didn't see a monster. I saw a prisoner being tortured, slowly, endlessly. I saw pain that mirrored my own. The kind that comes from being trapped in a life that doesn't fit, in a role that suffocates. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I didn't know why I was apologizing or to whom. I moved forward on trembling legs. The wolf watched me, its body tensed, muscles coiled beneath bloodied fur. A low growl rumbled in its chest, warning born of mistrust and survival instinct, but it didn't snap at me. It waited. When I reached the nearest chain, I knelt in the mud. The silver was warm to the touch, uncomfortably so. I wrapped my fingers around it, trying to find where the stake met the iron post. The moment my skin made contact, fire exploded through my palm. I gasped, nearly letting go, but forced myself to hold on. The wolf's golden eyes widened. My scholar's pendant, a simple silver circle I'd worn since my first day at the archives, grew suddenly hot against my chest. Then it cracked with a sound like breaking ice. The pieces fell into the mud, glowing faintly before the light died. I didn't have time to wonder what that meant. I grabbed the iron post with both hands, ignoring the burning pain in my palm, and pulled. The wet earth groaned. The stake shifted an inch, then two. The wolf let out a scream that was almost human. Its body convulsed as the chain loosened, the silver no longer pressed quite so tightly against burned flesh. Steam rose from the wounds, carrying the smell of scorched fur and something darker, like burning metal. I heaved again, putting all my weight into it. The stake came free with a sickening squelch, and one massive leg was freed. The chain fell slack, splashing into a puddle. Thunder rolled overhead, so loud it shook my bones. I scrambled to the next stake, my hands already raw and bleeding. The wolf watched me work, its breathing, ragged, golden eyes never leaving my face. As I worked on the second chain, lightning struck close enough that I felt the air crackle. In that brilliant flash of light, I saw something I'd missed before. Beneath the matted fur on the wolf's chest, barely visible through blood and dirt, was a symbol. I recognized it from my studies. The crown of shadow, the sigil of the last Alpha House, the one that had ruled before the lunar wars tore everything apart. The one that had been erased from every official record, mentioned only in whispered legends and burned manuscripts. This wasn't just any wolf, this was royalty. This was history itself, chained and bleeding in the mud. My hands moved faster, frantic now. The second stake came loose, then the third. Each time a chain fell away, the wolf's breathing grew stronger, its eyes burned brighter. "Who did this to you?" I whispered, though I knew it couldn't answer. The rain intensified, turning the clearing into a churning sea of mud and water. I could barely see, could barely breathe, but I kept working. The fourth chain, the fifth. Only one remained, the collar around its throat. I reached for the collar's lock, but there was no keyhole, no mechanism I could understand. It was pure silver, glowing with that same cruel magic, fused seamlessly together. The metal seared my fingertips when I touched it. Then the wolf moved. Its body began to convulse violently, limbs jerking as if struck by lightning. I stumbled back, terrified I'd done something wrong, that I'd killed it by freeing the other chains. But this wasn't death. This was transformation. The sound of breaking bones filled the clearing, sharp cracks that echoed over the thunder. The wolf's spine elongated, twisting impossibly. Its snout retracted, features smoothing and reshaping into something horrifyingly human. Fur receded into skin slick with rain and blood. I couldn't look away. It was beautiful and terrible, like watching a star die and be born again in the same breath. When it was over, a man knelt in the mud where the wolf had been. Naked, scarred, his body still trembling from the violent shift. The silver collar remained around his throat, too tight, cutting into his skin. He lifted his head, and I saw those same golden eyes. "Who are you?" The words tumbled from my mouth before I could stop them. He stared at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, like it had been carved from stone by an angry god. Scars crisscrossed his chest and arms, silver white against tanned skin. Dark hair, wet and matted, fell past his shoulders. When he spoke, his voice was rough from disuse, a growl wrapped in human sounds. But the word he said made my blood run cold. Lyra, my name. He spoke my name. How do you know? I couldn't finish the question. He rose slowly to his feet, unsteady, like a newborn learning to walk. Even weakened, he was massive, easily over 6.5 feet tall, all muscle and predatory grace. He took a step toward me, and I instinctively backed up. I have known your name, he said, his golden eyes never leaving mine. Since the first night the moon rose full over this cursed forest. Since the night they chained me here and left me to rot. He knelt before me in the mud so suddenly I gasped. His large hand reached for mine, the one burned by the silver chains. He lifted it gently, reverently, and pressed his lips to the scorched skin on the back of my hand. The touch sent electricity racing up my arm, warm and terrifying all at once. You have freed me, he said, his voice dropping to something almost like worship. The chains held my body, but they could not hold my soul. Every night, I walked the dream paths. Every night, I searched for the one who could break my bonds. I don't understand, I whispered. You will. He looked up at me, and I saw something ancient in those golden eyes. Something that had watched empires rise and fall. The gods play cruel games, little scholar. They bound me in silver and left me to suffer, but they also sent you. And now that you've touched the chains, now that your blood is mixed with mine on sacred ground, he turned my hand over, showing me my palm. The burn wasn't just a burn anymore. Silver lines traced across my skin, forming a pattern that glowed faintly in the darkness. Now the gods have bound you too. The sound of horns ripped through the storm, deep, hollow, and filled with menace. They came from the east, back toward the city. The Silver Order. The man's head snapped up, every muscle in his body tensing. In that moment, he looked more wolf than human, despite his skin. They've tracked me. His voice was a snarl. They always do. Silver hounds can smell cursed blood from miles away. Cursed? I stepped back from him. What are you? I am what remains of a dead age. He grabbed my wrist, not roughly but firmly, and you are now marked as mine. If they find you here, they will kill you. They kill anything tainted by wolf blood. The horn sounded again, closer now. I could hear the baying of hounds beneath the thunder, excited and hungry. We have to run, he said, pulling me toward the western edge of the clearing. I don't even know your name. He looked back at me, and for the first time, something like a smile touched his scarred face. My pack called me Kale. My enemies called me the Shadow King. We ran through the forest like hunted prey. Kale moved with impossible speed and grace despite his recent imprisonment, his bare feet silent on the muddy ground. He kept his hand locked around my wrist, pulling me forward whenever I stumbled. Behind us, the hounds grew louder. Closer. Your veins, Kale said suddenly, his eyes fixed on my arm even as we ran. They're glowing. I looked down and nearly tripped. Beneath my skin, faint silver lines traced the path of my blood vessels, pulsing with each heartbeat. They were brightest where the burn mark sat on my palm, spreading up my arm like roots seeking water. What's happening to me? The bond is forming. His grip tightened. When you freed me, when your blood touched the chains on sacred ground during a storm, you created a link. The old magic doesn't care about consent or choice. It simply is. What kind of bond? He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled me sharply to the left into a thick copse of trees. We pressed against the bark, his body shielding mine from view. I could feel the heat radiating from his skin, smell the wild scent of him, rain and earth and something darker, like smoke from a funeral pyre. The hounds burst into view moments later. Not dogs, but something worse. They were massive, gray-furred beasts with eyes that glowed red in the darkness. Silver collars circled their throats, and silver-tipped arrows bristled from quivers on their handlers' backs. The Silver Order's hunters wore black cloaks marked with white crescents. Their faces were hidden behind silver masks shaped like wolves frozen in eternal snarls. There were 6 of them, moving through the forest with practiced efficiency. One of the hounds paused, sniffing the air near where we hid, its red eyes fixed on our hiding spot. Kale's body tensed against mine. His breathing changed, becoming deeper, more animal. When I glanced at his face, I saw his pupils had dilated until the gold of his irises was just a thin ring. His teeth looked sharper somehow. The hound took a step toward us, growling low in its throat. Then one of the hunters whistled sharply. "This way. The trail leads south." The hound hesitated, then turned to follow its pack. Within moments, they were gone, swallowed by the storm and the darkness. Kale didn't move for a long time. When Kale finally pulled away from me, I saw he was shaking, not from fear or cold, but from something darker. His fingers had elongated into claws, black and curved like scythes. The muscles in his arms and back rippled beneath his skin as if something was trying to tear its way out. "We need to keep moving." He ground out, his voice more beast than man now. "The moon is low. The bond is strengthening." I can barely hold the shift back. We ran again, splashing through swamps that sucked at our feet, dodging trees that seemed to reach for us with gnarled branches. The storm showed no signs of ending. If anything, it grew worse, as if the sky itself was angry at what we'd done. We'd been running for what felt like hours when we finally heard them behind us again. The hounds, the hunters, and this time, they were too close. Kale shoved me behind a fallen tree. "Stay down," he ordered. "No matter what you see, stay hidden." "What are you doing?" But he was already walking back toward the sounds of pursuit, his body changing with each step, bones cracking, muscle expanding, fur sprouting across skin that had been human just moments before. The hunters emerged from the trees, and Kale met them in a form that was neither wolf nor man. He was something in between, something nightmarish. 7 feet tall, covered in black fur, with a wolf's head on a body that stood upright like a human. His claws were longer than my fingers, dripping with rainwater that looked black in the darkness. The first hunter didn't even have time to scream. Kale moved like liquid shadow, tearing through armor and flesh with horrifying ease. Blood sprayed across the white trees, turning them red. The other hunters scattered, trying to surround him, but he was too fast, too strong. One tried to fire an arrow, but Kale caught it mid-flight and drove it through another hunter's throat. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. This was what I had freed. This was the monster the Silver Order had chained for good reason. When it was over, Kale stood among the bodies, breathing heavily. Steam rose from his fur. Slowly, he turned to look at me with those burning gold eyes. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "You're afraid of me now." His voice was thick, distorted by his transformed jaw. But there was something in it that sounded like pain. I forced myself to stand, my legs shaking so badly I nearly fell. "You killed them. They would have killed us both." He took a step toward me, and I flinched. He stopped immediately, something like hurt flashing across his monstrous face. "I am what they made me." Chains and silver and endless pain, it doesn't make you gentle. The words hit me harder than I expected. I thought about the burns on his body, the scars that crisscrossed his skin. How long had he been chained? How long had he suffered? "I'm not afraid," I lied. But my voice shook. "You should be." He began to shift back to human form, the transformation slower this time, more controlled. When he was fully human again, naked and blood-splattered in the rain, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "I'm no man, Lyra." I stopped being human the day they bound me. I stepped closer to him and saw him tense in surprise. Then what am I? Because these marks on my skin say I'm not fully human anymore either. We reached the ruins as dawn threatened the eastern sky. The old silver temple rose from the forest floor like broken teeth, its once proud pillars cracked and overrun with vines. But even in ruin, it was beautiful. The stone was white marble veined with silver, and despite centuries of neglect, it still held an aura of power. As soon as my feet crossed the threshold, the symbols carved into the walls began to glow. Soft at first, then brighter, until the entire structure was lit by pale silver light. Kale stopped, staring at the walls with something like fear in his eyes. "It recognizes you." "What does that mean?" "This temple was built by the first moon priests," he said slowly, approaching one of the glowing walls with careful steps. "They serve the lunar goddess directly. Only those chosen by the moon itself could make these symbols wake." I touched one of the glowing carvings, and warmth spread through my fingertips. The symbol was a crescent moon cradling a star. As my skin made contact, images flooded my mind. Not memories, but something older. Knowledge that had been sleeping in my blood, waiting to be awakened. "This is where they forged your chains," I whispered, understanding suddenly clear. Kale sank to his knees in the center of the temple, his head bowed. "I remember now. The night they brought me here." His voice was hollow, distant. My own pack, my own blood. I knelt beside him, close enough to touch but not quite daring to. "What happened?" "The moon law," he said bitterly. "An ancient rule that said no alpha could refuse the goddess's call. When the blood moon rose, I was supposed to sacrifice myself to renew the pack's power. To die so they could live another generation. You refused. I refused." His hands clenched into fists. "I was 20 years old, and they wanted me to cut my own throat on an altar. So I ran. But you can't run from your own family. They caught me, dragged me here, and the priests forged chains of pure silver blessed by the moon herself." He looked up at the ceiling, where more symbols glowed. "They said I would hang here until I accepted my fate. Until I was ready to die for them." A bitter laugh escaped him. "That was 47 years ago." My breath caught. 47 years? But you look. Time moves differently for those bound by moon magic. I pulled the cloak from my shoulders, using my teeth to tear a strip from its edge. The fabric was soaked through, but it would work. I moved closer to Kale, reaching for the wounds on his chest where the chains had burned deepest. He caught my wrist, his grip gentle despite his obvious strength. "Don't. You've already bound yourself to me by freeing me. If you tend my wounds with your own hands, the bond will deepen further. I don't care." The words surprised me as much as they surprised him. But they were true. "You've suffered enough. Someone should care." His golden eyes searched my face, looking for something I didn't understand. Finally, he released my wrist and sat still as I began to wrap the wounds. His skin was hot beneath my touch, feverish. The silver burns were deep, exposing muscle and bone in places. I worked carefully, binding each wound with strips of my cloak. "I freed you," I said quietly as I worked. "Now you owe me truth, all of it. What is this bond? What am I becoming?" He was silent for so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Truth comes with blood, not words, but I will try." He took my burned hand, holding it palm, up between us. "This mark connects us, soul to soul. What I feel, you will begin to feel. Where I go, you will be pulled to follow. And if one of us dies..." He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. The temple suddenly blazed with light so bright, I had to shield my eyes. The symbols on the walls moved, flowing like liquid silver, reorganizing themselves into new patterns. The temperature dropped so fast, I could see my breath misting in the air. Kale grabbed me, pulling me close to his chest as a figure materialized in the center of the temple. It was a wolf, but not solid, made of pure moonlight and shadow. Massive, ancient, it radiated power that made my knees weak. The spirit wolf's eyes, deep as the void between stars, fixed on me. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating in my bones rather than my ears. "Moonborn." The word shook the temple's foundations. "The chains are broken. The debt is due." Kyle bowed his head, his entire body trembling. I'd never seen him show fear before, not even when facing the hunters. But now he was terrified, pressing me behind him protectively even as he shook. "Please," he whispered to the spirit. She didn't know. She was only showing mercy. The wolf's gaze never left me. She knew. The blood remembers what the mind forgets. The howl started somewhere in the far distance. One voice, then two, then dozens. The sound built until it filled the entire forest. A symphony of wolf song that made the air vibrate. Kale's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock, and something else. Hope, maybe. Or fear. "They're coming," he breathed. "All of them. Every wolf in the territories, they sense it. Their alpha has returned." The spirit wolf began to fade, but its voice echoed long after its form vanished. "The moon has chosen. The crown passes. The blood moon rises." As it disappeared completely, the temple's light died. We were left in darkness except for the faint glow of the symbols on my skin. Then, pain exploded through my body. I collapsed, screaming. It felt like fire and ice were racing through my veins simultaneously, rewriting something fundamental in my blood. The silver marks on my skin blazed brighter, spreading across my arms, my chest, crawling up my neck. Kale caught me before I hit the stone floor. "Lyra, stay with me." But I couldn't answer. The pain swallowed everything. I was drowning in silver fire. My veins burned like someone had filled them with molten metal. Every nerve ending screamed. Through the pain, I could hear Kale's voice, desperate and frightened, but his words didn't make sense anymore. The marks spread faster now, covering my skin in intricate patterns. They weren't random. They were writing. Ancient symbols from languages that hadn't been spoken in 1,000 years, spelling out truths I couldn't yet read. My back arched as a particularly violent wave of pain crashed through me. Something inside me was breaking apart and reforming over and over. My bones felt too large for my skin, my blood too hot for my veins. Through my half-closed eyes, I saw Kale's face above me. His golden eyes were wet with tears he probably didn't even know he was shedding. "I'm sorry," he whispered over and over like a prayer. "I'm so sorry. If I'd known the bond would do this to you, I would have stayed in those chains forever." But even through the agony, I knew that was a lie. We both did. This was always meant to happen. The moment I'd touched those chains, our fates had tangled together too tightly to ever separate. Kale paced at the edge of the temple, his movements jerky with agitation. I could hear him muttering to himself, arguing with something only he could hear. Twice he started toward me, then stopped, clenching his fists so hard his claws drew blood from his palms. "I could end it," he said suddenly, his voice rough. "One clean strike. Sever the bond before it fully forms. You would die, but you'd be free. You'd be human again." The words should have terrified me. Instead, they made me angry. I forced my eyes open, forced words through my pain-clenched teeth. "Don't you dare." He turned to stare at me, shock clear on his face. "I didn't. Free you, so you could. Kill me." Each word was a battle. I freed you, because it was right, because you deserved freedom. You don't understand what you're becoming. Neither do you. I tried to sit up and failed, collapsing back. "So we'll figure it out. Together." He stood frozen for a long moment, torn between the mercy of ending my suffering and the selfish desire to keep me alive. Finally, he crossed to me in 3 long strides and knelt, gathering me into his arms. "Then I'll protect you," he said fiercely. "From the Order, from the Pax, from the Moon Council itself if I must." Kale carried me from the temple as the sun began to rise. The forest had changed. Where before it had been dark and threatening, now it seemed almost welcoming. Birds sang from branches. Shafts of golden light pierced the canopy. Or maybe it was me who had changed. Maybe I was seeing it through different eyes now. The pain had faded to a dull throb, manageable. The silver marks no longer burned. They'd settled into my skin like they'd always been there, glowing faintly with each beat of my heart. Kale moved through the trees with purpose, heading west toward the deepest part of the forest, somewhere I'd never been. Somewhere the maps didn't show. "Where are we going?" My voice was hoarse from screaming. "To the edge of my old territory," he said. "There's a place there, hidden, safe. You need to rest, and I need to." He hesitated. "I need to prepare." "For what?" He looked down at me, and I saw the weight of centuries in his eyes. "For war. The Moon Council won't let me live. The Silver Order will hunt us both now. And when my old pack realizes I've returned, they'll come to finish what they started." His arms tightened around me protectively. "But first, you need to understand what you've become." We reached the edge of the forest, just as the sun cleared the horizon. Cal set me down gently near a small stream, clear water bubbling over smooth stones. The sound was peaceful, at odds with everything we'd just survived. I looked at my reflection in the water and barely recognized the person staring back. The silver marks covered most of my visible skin now, swirling patterns that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. My eyes, once plain brown, now had flecks of gold dancing in their depths. But it was my wrist that drew my attention. There, identical on both KL and me, was a mark that blazed brighter than all the others. A crown wreathed in shadow, with a crescent moon above it, the bond sigil, complete and permanent. KL knelt beside me at the stream's edge, studying his own wrist with an expression I couldn't read. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Almost gentle. You freed me from chains of silver, little scholar. He took my hand, pressing our marked wrists together. The symbols flared bright at the contact, warm and alive. But I've bound you to chains of destiny instead. In the distance, dozens of howls rose to greet the dawn. The Shadow King had returned, and his mate wore the moon's blessing. Whatever came next, we would face it together.